As the world accelerates toward clean energy and advanced technologies, demand for critical raw materials has never been higher.
Few regions hold as much untapped potential or strategic significance as Central Asia.
From rare earth elements to essential battery minerals, this region sits at the crossroads of global ambition and geopolitical competition.
In this session, we take a deeper dive into Central Asia's evolving critical minerals landscape, where international investment from the EU, China, the US and the UK intersects with local governance, environmental pressures and shifting political priorities.
Join us as we unpack the complex chessboard defining the future of critical minerals and the region poised to shape it.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ros. I've been to the region on several occasions and visited most of the mines in Kazakhstan, it feels like. I've certainly been to every mining town. And in January, I'm going to be founding a Eurasia Critical Minerals Association. So if you're interested, come and talk to me about that afterwards. So I'm going to be your pilot for the next 80 minutes, so buckle up. And to start our journey, we have a few words from Richard Oldcorn from SRK Consulting, who has spent 25 years in mining geotechnics and project evaluation and conducts an annual audit of ERG projects. Thank you, Richard.
Charles, thanks, Arthur. Can you hear me okay? There's not many people here, so this is a traditional warm-up. I think that blurb that you just introduced me was a little bit out of date now, but anyway. I do. Thanks very much. I guess here we are again, another couple of years down the line from when we started first talking about critical minerals in earnest, and we were very excited 2-3 years ago. I guess just a bit of a scene setter really for some of the exciting talks and presentations that we're going to see today about what's going on in the region. And it's not all about geology, that's why I put it in there. It is kind of, but it isn't. So I'll explain. When we were, how's this going to work? There we go. When we were here a couple of years ago, I presented some of these slides with all these pretty pictures of amazing deposits, impressive, explaining the impressive portfolio of critical strategic minerals, and how great the opportunities were. We were all very excited about that, partnerships with the UK, with EU countries, how we're going to get together with these countries in Central Asia who are lucky enough to have this amazing mineral endowment. So you've got amazing mobile belts, you've got the Tethyan metallogenic belt stretching right across the region to China from Eastern Europe. It did seem then that we're all very excited. You've got things like lithium and tungsten and rare earths and whatnot. So I guess, and it's an amazingly fertile region. We all understand that. We've been there many times. It's not just the scale of the mineral endowment, it's the size of the region. We've got to remember that Kazakhstan, I keep forgetting that Kazakhstan's the 9th largest country in the world. It's got one of the lowest population densities in the world, 6.2 people per kilometre. So, the geology is great, the landscape is great, and the potential is great, but are we realizing that potential? Here's another slide that I showed a couple of years ago, and I've just updated it, showing exploration activity. Obviously, exploration isn't be all and end all of everything that goes on in the region, but kind of shows you where things haven't really moved in Central Asia. I mean, Kazakhstan is obviously the big country in terms of exploration investment. This all comes from S&P. Thank you very much, guys. But it's still kind of down there. Forget Australia, Canada, and US, but look at the peer group, and you see that the investment's not there. Now, it doesn't tell the whole story. There's obviously some in-country stuff that doesn't get captured. There's government things that don't get captured, but you get the picture, right? There's not enough going on. What is what is the issue? Is it, I mean, clearly what it's telling you is that there's more exploration is needed and more companies need to be doing exploration. And when you start to think about Western companies in Kazakhstan or in the region, there are many, right? Apart from the ones, like Kaz Minerals, who are already embedded in thing and came out of Kazakhstan. But where are the exciting opportunities for those countries that are going to form those relationships between this part of the world, that part of the world? There are a few notable examples. I'm going to shout out Ferroalloys, who you might have seen they've just announced they've got a feasibility study published on their vanadium deposits in the south of Kazakhstan. Amazing untapped resource, world class. But where are all the others? Where are the exploration companies, and where are the other companies investing in local companies, of which there are many, as we all know, who've been to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all these places. So it's a sobering thought, and of course, when you look at that level of investment and you look at what's needed, you realize that there's a long way to go. We want all these lovely critical minerals that we've got. One of the problems, of course, of putting up pretty maps showing this wonderful mineral endowment is that and all these wonderful mobile metallogenic belts, is that you get the impression, or some people get the impression, that you can just go in and you can, get these deposits, start developing them, mining them, but it's never like that. And whilst a lot of the people in this room have been around for a very long time talking about mineral deposit evaluation and development of projects, people still have this idea that it's quick and you can just walk in and get involved, and suddenly you go from the ground to metal straight away, and it doesn't take you very long. This slide is kind of always, it's a very old slide, as you can tell, but it never really, I always show it because it makes sense, just to keep showing it to people, because there's a huge difference in the amount of work you need to do from looking at a project and the work you've got to do technically to get something to the point where you can mine it and develop it and produce the metal. And at the same time, if you look at the lower bar, lots of projects fall away. So exploration is costly, it's risky, it's time consuming, and so is project development, and so is permitting. I think last time I looked, 2023 was taking 15 years to get a project on the ground. And that's globally, of course, but it's no different in Central Asia than it is to anywhere else. There are things you need to do, and it takes time. I think when I just had a quick look at the S&P data, and they're now talking it's taking 16 years, so it's not getting any shorter. We're not suddenly in a permitting kind of project development squeeze. So there's a lot to do, and so what encourages people to move forward? So it's not all doom and gloom. I just wanted to say, and this is a bit of a segue to some of the talks that you're going to see today through all the day about the region and about some of the things that are happening. It's extremely positive. So just taking Kazakhstan, for example, we've got a lot of things that are being developed by Kazakhstan, implemented in the government and locally around how to make the area more attractive and how to improve the governance, so that when you go into the country, you're more inclined to say, yes, this works, I understand this is where I want to put my money. And they've been doing a huge amount of work. You think about the KazRC, the reporting code. If you think about PONEN, which is the registration of experts, so they can become competent persons in reporting resources and reserves. If you think about the cadastre to identify mineral properties and all these areas. I mean, there's a bit of work to be done on that still, but it's only embryonic, right? So there's all this stuff. And if you also think about things like when they reviewed the subsoil code in 2018 and the environmental code in 2021, And from that, the implementation of best available techniques, which is basically, making more sustainable solutions for mining projects, so that you have to build these into your projects. Get away from the pay to pollute issue. Encourage people to think of new ways to develop these projects. Reduce the environmental footprint. All these things are happening in Kazakhstan now, and I think where Kazakhstan leads, the other countries in the regions need to follow. They don't need to reinvent anything, and you can see the new Uzbekistan mining code. And somebody mentioned to me there was a recent team up between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, a joint geology working group on rare earths to develop critical rare earth deposits, and not just rare earths but other critical minerals. So, Kazakhstan has led the way. The others hopefully will follow, but it takes time. Yeah. So it's not all about geology. It's about establishing a framework for helping people develop the projects that they want to look at. And we really need to see more investment from this region into that region, and people have got to put the money in, and they've got to spend the time and effort. And if the countries are helping them do that, then we need to be aware of that, and we need to recognize that. So I have every confidence it'll be achieved. I think it's going to improve. It's going to get better and better and better. It will take time, of course. Nothing happens overnight. But we believe in it. We've been in Kazakhstan 15 years, and we're not going anywhere anytime soon. So look forward to a great day and lots of interesting speakers and insights. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. It's always good to start with a bit of optimism. And hopefully we're going to have more optimism from Simon Glancy from Strategic Solutions, who is a consultant who advises government, investors and donors on investment risks in Central Asia. Thank you.
Good morning.
Point it up there.
Oh, sorry.
It takes about a second.
In my presentation, I want to cover on a range of issues related to the global race for Central Asia's critical raw materials. How effective have Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan's critical raw materials strategies been? Growing importance of state mining companies and anchoring future deals with investors, and the geopolitics of critical raw materials in both countries. Let me start by arguing that 2025 is the year when the global race to secure critical raw materials in Central Asia markedly accelerated. The rules deciding who gets preferential access to them changed. Specifically, multiple states and political blocs are now competing for access to critical raw materials. 2025 saw the entry for the first time of the US seeking to secure major deals to offtake critical raw materials for its civil and defense industries, directly challenging China, which until now was usually seen as the region's go-to investor and trading partner. The approach Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan have taken to develop their critical raw materials sector has differed. Still this year, the Kazakh government hoped that the sector's undoubted long-term potential would persuade both international and domestic mining groups to enter the market. The reality has been very different. Domestic and international mining groups have not been persuaded to invest in critical raw materials to anything like the government's expectations. Demand was unpredictable, capital investment costs high, and the investment case to develop copper and gold projects has been far more attractive. Contrast this with Uzbekistan, which has taken a different approach in firstly, not leaving the sector's development to the private sector, and secondly, establishing in 2024 a dedicated state-owned critical raw materials company, UzTMK, that will partner most international firms wanting to access critical raw materials in this market. Another important change is that Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan now want to ensure they capture far more of the benefits of their critical raw material resources through localization, by requiring potential investors to build processing facilities and related production infrastructure in country, requiring them to support the development of local industries that can utilize these critical raw materials and increasing the share of equipment, machinery, goods, and services sourced locally when building and operating facilities. In December 2023, the Kazakh government approved a critical raw materials strategy called the Comprehensive Plan for the Development of Rare and Rare Earth Metals 2024 to 2028. This was backed by state funding of $23 million over that period, which, given the massive capital development costs needed to develop the sector, made little impact on encouraging private investment into the market. This must be a factor explaining the announcement by Kazakhstan's State Industrial Bank, the Development Bank of Kazakhstan, in October 2025 to create a $1 billion financing program for projects in the extraction and processing of rare earth and critical materials from 2025 to 2030. Increasing the scale and variety of critical raw materials processed is crucial to the sector's future success in attracting investment. In October 2025, the government set up 4 priorities for utilizing critical raw materials by industry, which are for use in the manufacturing of semiconductors, batteries, heat-resistant alloys, and permanent magnets. For now, most of the companies involved in utilizing critical raw materials in this manufacturing are domestic, such as Kazink, Kazakhmys, and Karmet, to produce semiconductors, and the Ulba metallurgical plant producing heat-resistant alloys. In the future, Sarıtagan Graphite will be involved in local battery production, as will the German industrial group Bergbau. Taza Metal Technologies is already processing high-purity manganese sulfate monohydrate for batteries. These ventures will enable localized manufacturing of batteries, e-vehicles, magnets, aviation parts, medical devices, and wind and solar power generation components. The information you see on screen here is taken from several different sources, notably Uzbekistan's 2030 National Development Plan and disclosures from the Ministry of Geology and the mining industry. By 2030, Uzbekistan has set a target of discovering up to 30 new reserves of tungsten, molybdenum, magnesium, lithium, germanium, graphite, vanadium, and titanium. Note that in December 2025, a long-term strategy to increase value creation from processing critical raw materials is to be finalized, and it will be interesting to see if its contents are made public. State critical raw materials company USTMK is developing more than 100 investment projects involving what it refers to as 25 strategic metals and mineral resources. For now, the priority is massively scaling up tungsten mining and processing. USTMK is targeting a global market share of 5.1% in tungsten by 2030, and this may be one of the targets included in the forthcoming critical raw materials strategy. Central to achieving that target is developing the large Saryakul tungsten deposit in the Samarkand region, which has an expected lifespan of up to 20 years. USTMK will construct a tungsten processing facility on site, which can process 1 million tons of ore annually and produce 4,000 tons of tungsten concentrate, most of which will be sold on the global market. Aside of this venture, USTMK has reached a series of other tungsten mining and processing agreements, many with Chinese partners, which I'll discuss later in the presentation. As I mentioned earlier, the Development Bank of Kazakhstan is launching a $1 billion financing program specifically to provide long-term affordable finance to companies involved in exploration and processing projects. This is a clear indication that the state and not the private sector will lead critical raw materials development in Kazakhstan, at least in the short term. The metals that will be prioritized for financing include rare earth metals, including scandium and yttrium, and critical materials, lithium, cobalt, tungsten, germanium, gallium, and graphite that are in global demand. The challenges pointed out by the industry blog Rare Earth Exchanges in a post on the 4th of December 2025 is to ensure alignment between exploration and mining activity on the one hand, with offtake agreements with end customers on the other, be these processors or added value manufacturers. While there is some demand already in industries like automotive, in most cases, entire industries and sectors utilizing critical raw materials need to be created. By contrast, in 2024, Uzbekistan realized that developing the critical raw materials sector had to be led by a dedicated state-owned company that would be the anchor investor in the market, working with domestic and foreign mining partners to develop critical raw materials projects at scale, while also sharing the benefits of successful investments with the Uzbek state. USTMK has been highly successful in promoting the strengths of its integrated business model, spanning upstream, midstream, and downstream operations to investors, financial institutions, and mining companies internationally, which its equivalent in Kazakhstan, the state mining group Tauken Samruk, has yet to achieve. This raises the question why Kazakhstan has not created a state mining company under Tauken Samruk dedicated to marketing and co-investing in critical raw materials projects with international investors. It's worth noting that despite Tauken Samruk being significantly larger than USTMK based on assets, the revenues Tauken Samruk generates from its critical raw material assets are close to zero. 99% of its revenues in 2024 and 2025 originate from processing and selling gold to the National Bank of Kazakhstan. Now let me make some brief comments about the geopolitics of critical raw materials in Central Asia. While China is facing increased competition for access to critical raw material resources in Central Asia, it continues to have significant advantages. Firstly, China's strategic patience and long-term outlook. It doesn't think tactically or transactionally. For over a decade, China has been assiduously investing in its Belt and Road Initiative to build infrastructure and localize industrial production across Central Asia, while ensuring supply chains connect the region with a huge Chinese market. Secondly, China is a turnkey investor. Engineering, procurement, and construction companies proliferate, operating at massive scale and investing in transformative deals. These include constructing mines, processing facilities, related project infrastructure, including building business and technoparks, and relocating companies from China to utilize the output. Thirdly, the sheer scale of long-term financing and investment China is willing to commit far exceeds what the US or the EU have been able to deploy. We got an indication of that from the size of mining and metallurgy deals secured in the China-Kazakhstan summit in June 2025. What comparisons can we draw with the EU and the US? The US has an entirely different approach. Firstly, it's no established presence in Central Asia's mining industry. Its main interest in the region has been investing in extracting oil and gas. Secondly, the US companies that are typically doing deals are not mining groups or processors, as is the case with China. They're often investment firms or commodity traders. Thirdly, US strategy is transactional. It will invest in developing critical raw materials mining and processing assets so long as it can offtake all the output to supply US industry. The US will not commit to localizing US industries abroad, so the benefit to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan is limited to the export sales value. The EU's interest in Central Asia's critical raw material resources is also to secure alternative sources to China. Essentially, the EU is seeking offtakes and therefore is now in a bidding war with the US, China, and many other countries like South Korea and Japan. Earlier this year, the EU announced a €12 billion investment package for developing strategic partnerships in Central Asia that earmarks $2.5 billion for developing critical raw materials projects in all 5 states in the region. The EU's offer in critical raw materials centers on offering technical expertise in geological exploration, applying ESG, and introducing new technologies and production methods. While commendable, South Korea, Turkey, Japan, and the UK are making similar offers. The other challenge facing the European Union is that its ability to invest in major industry deals, build the scale of mining and processing infrastructure Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan need, is much more constrained than China or the US. Nor is it clear the extent to which EU-backed projects would see European companies seeking to process critical raw materials localize some of that in Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan. In all likelihood, China and the US can easily outbid Europe to acquire assets, building infrastructure and executing deals more quickly. Thus, the EU risks being squeezed out as a major player in the region. I'm going to fast. This slide shows the investor activity across the critical raw materials value chain in Kazakhstan. The government's focus has been to encourage more investment in exploration to increase the success rate of new discoveries and rework Soviet legacy deposits that were previously considered unviable. This year, we've seen a range of investor projects to build mines and processing facilities for tungsten, graphite, and vanadium. The Cove Capital, Sarytsagan, and Tauken Samruk Jashin tungsten projects have been much discussed. So I've included some other examples of new critical raw materials investments by Kazakh mining groups announced in 2025. Firstly, Rare Metals Kazakhstan will rework the Abukov titanium zirconium deposit in northern Kazakhstan, which was discovered by Soviet scientists in 1958. Mining will start in 2026 with a new processing plant producing ilmenite and rutile zirconium concentrate used in the production of ferroalloys. The construction of a rare metals processing and production complex at the Akmaya deposit in the Karagandai region by Akmaya Tungsten. Once operational, this will produce 200,000 tons of ore. 200,000 tons of ore to produce 350 tons of tungsten. Launch is expected in 2028. The construction of a production facility to process molybdenum dioxide powder into molybdenum trioxide by Trimo Limited. Output is expected to be 500 tons per annum with the project launch in 2025. And during 2027 to 2029, a new processing and production complex will be built by Balkash Resources at the Caritas 2 and Koksaboy deposits in the Karagandai region. This venture is expected to produce 50,000 tons of molybdenum concentrate and 100,000 tons of copper concentrate. Excellent. My last slide. And finally, while the range of companies, consultancies, third level and scientific institutions in negotiations with USTMK is truly global, what's striking is many of the core strategic partnership agreements and joint ventures are with Chinese mining, technology and EPC groups, many of which are state-owned, that include Xiamen Tungsten, a state-owned Chinese mining group that is one of the world's largest tungsten mining producers and which USTMK characterizes as an important strategic partnership. The deal includes joint ventures to process molybdenum, tungsten and nickel, possibly constructing new hydrometallurgical facilities, creating joint production clusters at the Metal of the Future Technopark, and significantly, Xiamen assisting USTMK to attract Chinese state investment for other USTMK projects. USTMK also plans to integrate Xiamen's advanced technological solutions to develop the Mixon copper mine development project. Secondly, Red Persimmon, which is another Chinese company, I believe, in the private sector. Here, the agreement is to modernize the Ingijka tungsten mine facilities by introducing new production technology to increase the volume of tungsten ore extraction by 900,000 tons a year and produce 1,671 tons of tungsten concentrate. Over that time, the figure will increase. Over time, that figure will increase to 5,040 tons. Thirdly, Xinhai Mining, which has an agreement to expand the processing of tungsten waste at the Ingijka enrichment plant that will increase tungsten concentrate production from 300 tons to 1,050 tons by 2028. Another interesting example is the Chanmen Battery Group agreement. Chanmen is a leading manufacturer of rechargeable batteries, energy storage systems, and sustainable battery recycling, and has concluded a joint venture with USTMK to manufacture industrial and household energy storage systems at the Technopark of Metals of the Future. And finally, JDC Sinomoli and Shanxi Non-Ferrous Central Asia Minerals Resources Development Company. The agreement here is to extract and process molybdenum and other critical raw materials and to work on joint scientific and technical projects. JDC Group is one of the largest molybdenum producers in Asia and the third largest molybdenum processor in the world. I will conclude there. Thank you very much.
Fantastic overview, Simon, very comprehensive. And by the way, if you want to sit there, you can, then you can see the slides. And next we have Pauline Atama, Senior Policy Analyst with the OECD, who is the Head of Sustainable Infrastructure and Green Growth, Eurasia. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'll start by thanking the organizers for inviting me once again at MINEX. It's always a pleasure to be here and to be part of this community of experts and industrial stakeholders. So today I'm going to be talking about the OECD's work on critical minerals development in Central Asia, starting with the background for the work that we're leading, not only in Central Asia, but also in other producing countries and region of critical minerals. We know that achieving resilient critical mineral supply will require expanded mining in regions including Central Asia or the broader Eurasia region, but also other regions such as Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. we know about the developments of agreements between countries that are looking to secure supply chain and producing countries, especially in Central Asia. We've heard about the developments in the framework of EU and Central Asia countries partnerships, even just last week at the EU Central Asia Forum in Tashkent. The C5+1 summit recently, which also seek to secure some specific projects. And we've heard from Simon about the ongoing developments on the side of producing countries of Central Asia that are looking to develop a supply of critical minerals for the future. However, we know that the development of mining sectors are also accompanied by a number of risks relating to governance, corruption, environmental degradation, and violation of human rights, as well as illicit financial flows. And these problems are specific to the mining industry. They're not specific to a geographic region. However, especially in economies where institutional frameworks and policy standards are weaker, those risks are even greater. And so at the OECD, we take the view that it's important in establishing those partnerships between countries looking to secure the supply and producing countries to also work for the sustainable development agenda of producing countries by enforcing a number of standards that mitigate the risks, that address the risks I just mentioned through strong standards and policy instruments. And if we fail to deliver those tangible benefits to producer countries, then that could lead actually to increased resource nationalism, as indicated by the 5-fold increase in export restrictions on critical minerals over the last decade. So that question is very much related to the security of supply. So to deliver its work, the OECD relies on a very broad range of experience and a large body of knowledge, spanning ensuring responsible business conduct across mineral supply chains, to promoting multi-stakeholder efforts for sustainable mining and industrialization, improving the development of mining regions and the well-being standards of their communities and indigenous people, ensuring tax transparency and countering risks of base erosion and profit shifting, including transfer pricing practices such as the undervaluation of critical minerals by mining companies, mitigating the environmental impacts of mining, and developing geopolitical scenarios. And so by leveraging this expertise, we've developed a horizontal initiative on making critical minerals development work for sustainable development. Now, I would like to focus specifically on the work that we've been doing for a small year now on advancing security and transparency for critical raw materials governance in Central Asia. The overall objective of this work, which is supported by the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, is to promote policies supporting good governance, quality investment, and alignment of critical minerals expansion with sustainable economic development goals. And for this, we're disseminating our standards and instruments in 3 key areas. The first one is responsible business conduct, which aims to address adverse impact of corporate mining activities on people, planet, and society. And to this, we're promoting a supply chain approach to the identification of risks, their assessment, their reporting and responses to those risks. So addressing the whole ecosystem around mining operators' operation. And those standards apply to corporate operations, but there's also a role for policymakers to promote those standards and to put in place tools that help to enforce those standards and ensure compliance. The second area in which our work focuses is the management of environmental risks, and that covers addressing and mitigating climate risks and decarbonizing mining activities, but also addressing water pollution and enhancing water demand as well as waste management, including with the purpose of developing circular economy approaches to mining development. And finally, the third area in which we're focusing our work is tax policy for addressing transfer pricing risks. I've mentioned a little bit about this before, but basically we're providing some guidance on minerals pricing, transfer pricing risks, and profit shifting, income tax, and tax incentives. And the idea is to make sure that the value generated by mining activities stays in the country and benefits the country as well as its local mining communities. This will be my last slide. I wanted to show the timeline of the work that we've been doing. It started in February this year with a high-level regional dialogue at the OECD Friends of Eurasia meeting in Paris. We've been delivering a number of workshops focusing on the three policy areas I presented just before, in Kazakhstan, in Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, which are the three countries this work has been focusing so far. In February next year, we're aiming to hold a high-level regional dialogue at the OECD Eurasia Week 2026 in Paris. And in March, April 2026, we will be launching a report that presents and details the situation, the baseline situation in Central Asian countries, the three focus countries I mentioned, and provide perspectives as well as policy recommendations in the three areas of responsible business conduct, environmental risks, and tax policies. I'll stop here, and if you want to learn more about this work, I'll be very happy to have a chat later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. You switch the mic off.
Which one?
It's fine. Now we've got Chris Lofthouse, who's the responsible mining lead at the Department for Business and Trade, and his team support UK companies working in mining and metals.
Thanks, Ross. I've promised to keep to 10 minutes, so I better crack on. Thanks to the conference organisers and Arthur for inviting me to speak today. It is appreciated. Just building on what Ross said, my role is focused on supporting UK businesses that work in the mining sector, promoting exports overseas and investment into overseas projects, and also contributing to policy development on mining and minerals. So here's the outline of the presentation. I will kick off with an introduction to DBT. So we are the UK government's Department for Economic Growth, with a responsibility for supporting UK business and opening up new international markets. We also promote free trade and encourage resilient supply chains. Growth is the #1 mission of this government, and DBT published the new UK industrial strategy earlier this year. And this is a whole of government effort to back the UK strengths with ambitious plans for 8 high growth sectors, known as the IS8, to support the whole of the UK economy. It's a 10-year plan built on stability and openness. And building on the industrial strategy, a new critical mineral strategy was published 9 days ago on the 22nd of November. And this new strategy directly links critical mineral demand to the UK's growth sectors. We've outlined how we can meet the short-term demand for critical minerals, but also how we can create a critical mineral industry that will bring jobs to the UK and deliver for business. Through the strategy, we'll build strong partnerships with key markets, including those in Central Asia, to diversify mineral production and processing, strengthening our supply chain. Apologies. Critical mineral supply chains are global. They're also subject to competition, unfair market practices, and increased concentration of mining and processing facilities. The UK cannot achieve its ambitions alone. Working with international partners to strengthen the UK's supply chains is a key theme of the new critical mineral strategy. And previous international engagement has led to high-level agreements with several countries, various initiatives under multilateral partnerships like the G7 and G20. In this slide, I've picked out 5 countries where we currently have specific mining and minerals DBT support. Although it's worth saying that DBT and the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, FCDO, can provide general support across the Central Asia region. The UK has existing memorandums of understanding on critical minerals with Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and Uzbekistan. And we're also in the process of agreeing a new critical minerals MOU with Kyrgyzstan, and we are expecting this to be signed shortly. So watch this space. In September this year, DBT organised an export-focused mining trade mission to Mongolia, Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan. And I was fortunate to take part in the second part of this. But yeah, this included the opportunity to join our UK pavilion at the MMCA mining event in Almaty in Kazakhstan. And as you can see, we face strong competition from Russia and China in particular. But it's clear there are opportunities for UK companies in the region. And we had a really excellent group of companies with us. And we were also well represented by our ambassador, Sally Axworthy, at the exhibition. And I'll just take the opportunity to thank my colleagues from the region for pulling together such an excellent programme. It was really successful. So what does the UK have to offer? Well, a good place to start is the brochure that we produced earlier this year, highlighting some good case studies from industry. And I've included the link there. To summarise, we have mining and technical expertise, some finance options from the UK to support mining, some activities in the midstream, mineral processing, very, very strong R&D and academia, a focus on ESG and high standards there, advanced manufacturing, and also the UK is known for its excellent international engagement. Importantly, the UK has the capability to support a mineral project throughout its entire life cycle, from mineral exploration and mine design right through to decommissioning and land rehabilitation. We're exploring ways to play a stronger role in facilitating offtake agreements, and will continue to consider new finance mechanisms which will de-risk responsible investment, partnering with investors, governments, and public finance institutions. London is a global mining finance centre, and we will work with LME, LSE, institutional investors, and listed multinational enterprises to leverage their expertise and strengthen the UK position. UK's Export Credit Agency, UKEF, has enhanced its international support to help de-risk UK supply chains through its new critical mineral finance product. And this allows UKEF to directly support overseas critical mineral projects that supply UK exporters with raw materials. And UKEF have also launched an early stage project guarantee, which can support critical mineral projects by providing a guarantee to a bank providing a loan to an overseas buyer to finance the purchase of services from a UK supplier for early project work. And this could include, early design work, technical services, and so forth. Due to time, I'm afraid I'm going to have to skip through a couple of these slides, but I would recommend, if you're interested in UKEF, do look up the website, and it has a full range of the products that are available. It's something that we're really looking to push at the moment, so I do encourage you to look at that. Finish off, I was just keen to pick out some really positive news stories from UK companies that are working in the Central Asia region. They are some, I promise. Oops. Yeah, so firstly, we have Camel producing copper in Kazakhstan, while also generating some of the energy requirements from a solar farm locally. Like Sold, and I see Lucy sitting there at the back, but doing really excellent work on mine waste and tailings across Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. But, fantastic region to work. Amazing photographs from that Richard kindly supplied. And finally, Weir Group, the Scottish engineering company, who are very active in the region, and last year were successfully benefited from UKEF support in Uzbekistan. So, yeah, just a few examples. Please do reach out if you have any questions or would like to follow up on anything. I'd be very keen to hear from you, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, and you kept well to time, so well done. And lastly, we have Dr. Turbe, who's Sustainability and Physical Market Development Manager at the London Metals Exchange, with a background at CRU and ArcelorMittal. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. So today I'll be representing the LME in a way. I'll probably going to be less focused on Eurasia and Central Asia, but I feel like what the LME is currently doing in terms of the financial infrastructure, that's going to be very beneficial in terms of the critical minerals and Central Asia in general in Eurasia. So I guess to begin with, there's so many different themes like sustainability, critical minerals. I mean, one may wonder how these things can be related. Let me go back to 1.5 years ago. So 1.5 years ago, there was a general almost like lobbying from the certain Western mining companies in terms of saying that, oh, nickel prices tanked. And one of the reasons they tanked because LME has introduced a lot of LME brands from Indonesia. And arguably these are the, if anyone has seen the emission curve of the nickel production, you'll see that there is a big gap between the Indonesian and the other producers. And the argument was that these guys are not sustainable and our production needs to have a premium to cover that. And it also, all these things were wrapped up in the critical minerals narrative. So I guess 1 year on, at the very last slide, I'll show you what's going on with that initiative, what's going on with the sustainability premium. But I guess what I'm gonna begin with is how LME is tackling the building the infrastructure for a sustainability premium and how it's being related to the critical minerals. So, wait a second. To begin with, I'm going to start on the basics. The LME's role. LME's role is price discovery and hedging. So any company who needs to financial risk manage, they have to hedge on the LME. And a third function is the physical delivery. So for the most of the very liquid contracts at the LME, these are the physically delivered contracts. So whenever you trade, it's all has the warehouse networks and brand listings, and all these things are very much related to the physical movement of the materials across the world. So just to explain the physical aspects of the market, I'm going to just show you the slide of all the warehouse networks. It covers all the world, and you'll notice that the warehouses are located on main consumption areas of the metals, which is the North America, Europe, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and recently you'll see that Jeddah has been added as one of the location points for metal consumption. Instead, we also have these are the physically settled contracts, and these are the brands, which means the production sites that are being eligible to be delivered to the LME to settle the contracts. And you'll see the red ones here highlighted are the ones according to the latest critical minerals list, is a UK's critical mineral list. These are the metals included in that. Some of them are growth metals, but for example, lead and zinc are also included, not in the UK list, but on, I think, the US list. So pretty much all the physically delivered contracts at LME are very, very important for the critical minerals list across the world. I guess, yeah, this is the representation of all the brands across the world. So we have the brands all over the world. There is no specific concentration of these brands. So whenever they have a big production site or producing all this metal, they're being represented, registered LME to be contracted. So if you look to the value chain, we work directly with the smelters and refiners. But across the value chain, LME prices are important because the miners, concentrates, downstream, everyone references LME prices. So even though we work directly with the smelting and refining companies, which are our producers, are the metal production sites, they have impact across the value chain in terms of whether it's upstream or downstream, and that. Yeah, we're gonna speed it up then. So as I mentioned, these all physically settled contracts, and as an LME, because we have all these producers registered with us, we have started certain initiatives called responsible sourcing. So that means whenever you have the brand that's being registered at the LME side, the metal producer, they have to be currently compliant with our responsible sourcing requirements, which means whenever the metal is being produced, the raw material sources for that metal has to be adhering to the OECD's guidance on responsible sourcing, which means there shouldn't be any conflict minerals, there shouldn't be any child labor or things like that. And as I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, the LME has embarked on going a bit further in terms of, so we have the common standard for all the producers, like responsible sourcing, and now we're going a bit further in terms of adding the sustainability premium. If companies go and beyond certain thresholds, they may be eligible to discover the sustainability premium. So in building that, we, as I mentioned, we're building the infrastructure in place. So we chose the aluminum, zinc, and copper and nickel. These are the metal. If you adhere to certain emission standards there, if you adhere to the sustainability credentials, you are eligible to be put in the program. So that means if you discover the sustainability price, if you adhere to these prices, you can reference additional premium on your contracts so that you get extra bucks, basically. I mean, for that, we've partnered with the Metals Hub, which is a trading platform. We have established a PRA agency just recently, a month ago in Dubai, and now that's going to be a pricing administrator. So in a way, so whenever we have all these transactions taking place, it will go directly fitting into that pricing administrator, so that it will be basically PRA. So in a way, LME is used for the hedging directly for the most liquid contracts, and for the lesser contracts, before it becomes a lot more liquid, before it becomes eligible for any kind of hedging in place, these prices can be discovered through the PRA agency. And an issue I mentioned about the nickel contract. So nickel, last year, all the lobbying and argument, we've established a low carbon nickel pilot because of that. So currently, if you're producing less than 20 tons of CO2 per ton of nickel, you are eligible to discover the low carbon nickel price. And we've offered that contract through the Metals Hub platform. So far, since the announcement in 2024, has been very little contracts taking place in terms of the trading volumes for the low carbon contract. But currently, in the last October, it has been increasing quite significantly. So we're working a lot in terms of bringing these contracts in place. So coming back to the physical infrastructure, I mentioned that the LME has established this pricing reporting agency in Dubai. And this is actually a quite important step because in a way, so for certain metals, I mean, the most liquid ones, you can easily create the contracts in one of the major exchanges, can build the hedging, etc. But for example, if someone mentioned scandium, and I remember looking to the scandium market, it's just 50 tons market. It's like, it's not a big market. And we see nowadays the issue with a lot of these critical minerals, they tend to be relatively small. The prices are not discovered properly, and the PRA agency can be a great tool to discover the prices and potentially build the hedging products through these kind of contracts. And I would say the Central Asia's role in a way that we mentioned about titanium sponges, we mentioned about antimony, gallium, germanium, tungsten. Some of these products are byproducts of the big like lead smelters or zinc smelters, for example. And these are very much interrelated contracts to a certain extent. And Central Asia having a big impact in terms of the reserves, in terms of the production sites, it has a potential impact in terms of working together with LME and not being a price takers, but potentially making price makers in the future. So 2 big points I tried to mention today. Hopefully it's quite clear, but yeah, thank you very much.
Fantastic. I'd like to thank everybody for their presentations. And now we're going to change the format a bit. So I'd like to invite down Han Ilhan, who is the Managing Director of Catalyst Strategies and advisor to the Chairman of TMK. And I'd also like to invite General Sir Richard Shirreff, who is co-founder and the managing partner of Strategia Worldwide and author of the 2017 War with Russia. Thank you. He was the Deputy Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Are you having your own meeting here?
Yes, we're catching up.
Okay. I don't know if you want to bring that mic. Okay, so now we're going to have a fireside chat, and it's a discussion panel, and we're going to be talking on the panel, the theme of the new frontier for critical minerals. So I'd like to start with you, Han. Why is it Eurasia the new frontier? Why is this region the new frontier?
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right, I think. So when it comes to critical raw materials, there are areas that have been already discovered. Latin America, by and large, has been discovered. US is extremely rich, but issues on the social acceptance side. Africa is still being explored. But, when you look at Central Asia, first of all, there is abundant of information from the Soviet times. So it's not in accordance with international standards, but it is in accordance with an international standard, which is, Soviet standard. So you find yourself in a region rather than just having to go out and do superficial mapping. This is a region that has ample amount of data. It is difficult to find that data. In fact, I talk about exploration has 2 phases at least in Uzbekistan, one in the office, and then once you find it in the office, then you go out in the field and drill. But so ample amount of information, and that information basically has a strong evidence that the region is extremely rich. And then there is also evidence on the ground. If you look at Uzbekistan, Novoye Gold is, was a world-class asset, 100+ years of reserves, the third largest producer in gold. If you look at Novoye Uran, 7% of uranium production in the world. If you look at Almalık after the expansions are done, probably 10th largest producer, copper producer in the world. 30% of the country has been explored, 70% is yet to be explored. And if that is not a mining destination, I don't know what is.
Absolutely. So some of the things that concern people who are looking at the region, I don't think anyone would dispute that it's geologically rich. But to you, Richard, I think there are risks. And so how do you combat the risks of operating in Central Asia?
Ross, thank you. And Han, it's great to be with you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me along today. Let me just sort of step back a little bit and have a bit of a sort of satellite-like overview, because it strikes me that in a world of shifting tectonic geopolitical plates, Central Asia is absolutely at the center of it. China, Russia, and when we talk about Russia, we cannot not talk about the elephant in the room, which is Russia's war in Ukraine. And then there are other players. There's the European Union. Is NATO potentially a player? NATO has had relationships with all Central Asian countries, all the strands under the Partnership for Peace, and more globally as well. And you can't, again, avoid the other elephant in the room in the shape of Trump and America, because that colors everything. Just focusing on some of those, I think China is de facto the dominant power. Russia is very much in China's pocket. You can't get away from the fact that what happens in Ukraine is going to color Central Asian attitudes to investment and engagement by UK, as we heard from Christopher, European Union. NATO I'm going to sort of put to a side, because NATO hasn't got the cash, which the European Union has, and its focus on critical minerals is very much through its member states, such as, for example, the United States C+5 or the C5+1 agreement. But then, of course, the fact is that Trump is not going to do anything for NATO. He's only interested in deals largely for himself. Forget America. This is about Trump feathering his own nest more than anything else. So coming back to the question, there's a whole lot of risk out there. So for any organization, any company engaging in Central Asia, and picking up the Christopher Lofthouse's point, there is absolutely a role for UK companies there. There's a role for EU companies, but for UK companies, it strikes me that it's about playing to strengths. It's about recognizing what UK companies are good at. And it's about precision and targeting and intelligence, so that you're not trying to go everywhere. So, and UK, as we heard, has got real capabilities in this area. But to deploy those capabilities, you've got to think about, number one, you've got to understand what's going on. And I think any company operating in that very complex region has got to either to build its own intelligence capability or to bring in an intelligence capability from outside. There is a mass of open source intelligence out there, but you've got to be able to suck up the intelligence and draw deductions from it for your company operations. And linking that, of course, the linkage there is understanding risk comprehensively. It's not just about focusing on technical risk, on the geological risk. It's about understanding the wider aspects of risk. What is the relationship between political, geopolitical, technical, and because so often it's the risks that the sort of interrelated risks that the real the real poo traps sit. And that's about building a risk framework and doing it, looking at it rigorously across the board. And then it's about linking risk to strategy and having an effectively thought through strategy based on where you want to get to, working back from where you want to get to where you are now, and designing that strategy, linking risk and strategy, and then testing it. And you won't expect anything else from an old soldier to say that wargaming is a really useful technique. And that's about setting up a red team. It's about role playing anybody basically who, whether it's any potential adversary, any potential stakeholder, who could basically screw up what you're trying to do, and to do it in a safe to fail environment. So you've thought it through before you start taking action. So there's some thoughts.
Fantastic. Han, so Richard speaks about the opportunity for the UK and EU companies. How can they compete in the region?
Yeah. Look, first, I'd like to share, it's really an honor to share the stage with Sir Richard here. And, I really feel sorry for us mining practitioners. I've been in this business for 40 years. Every decade, we need to learn something new. Okay? It started with, some of you, probably very few of you will remember Global Mining Initiative that started in year 2000. So I was a part of that. We learned the importance of social aspects of mining. What do we know about social aspects of mining? I'm an engineer, but we had to learn it. And just coming back to today, now we need to learn geopolitics, because geopolitics is driving critical raw materials, and critical raw materials is driving geopolitics. And so I'm really honored and privileged to be, next to Sir Richard here. And then, oftentimes we think that we have it tough in our lives. I don't think we do. So thank you for your service, first of all. I think before I answer your question, what is important to understand is, what is the value proposition of China? If you don't understand that, perhaps you can have your own value proposition, but is it really compatible to what's there? First, China doesn't have an MOU with Uzbekistan. Doesn't need one. Second, the value proposition is extremely simple, extremely powerful, extremely transparent. China has been doing this in front of our eyes in the last 25 years. Number one, unlimited capital. It's being deployed much faster than any of the public or private capital in the Western world. Number two, best technology in the world. I'm sorry, we have to get off our high horse. They do have the best technology. Why? They've been investing in it for 25 years. There are pockets of it that, we can compete like we can in the US. But overall, we need to recognize that. Third, which is, I think, the most complicated one, human resources. So capital, to be honest with you, I'm not concerned about capital anymore, particularly being an American. I can see, how it's being deployed rapidly, but that doesn't solve the entire problem. Human resources. Okay, so you have the capital. It's a wonderful project on paper. Who's going to operate it? Who's going to design it? China, if you wanted a design center of 200, 400 people that could set that up in 2 to 4 months. How many Western engineering companies could do that? So unlimited capital, one of the best technologies, unlimited human resources. So look, I've been retained by Uzbekistan to help them in their critical raw materials. I just got back from Brussels for 3 days, 4 days. I haven't heard a single value proposition. This is what I've heard in Brussels. We have the capital. We may be able to deploy it because that capital's risk tolerance is extremely low. But we have 2 conditions. One is the offtakes needs to come to EU. Second, ESG. And these are non-negotiable. I have heard that non-negotiable word several times. So please, ladies and gentlemen, put yourself on the other side. This is what EU is saying. We want your product, but we have conditions. That is not a value proposition. That is a condition of a transaction. China is already there. We have, on an average, probably a Chinese enterprise in our office every week. So please understand the value proposition of the dominant force that you're trying to replace and come up with a value proposition. Is there? Absolutely. It's not about capital. You cannot compete with that capital. But what you can compete with, enhancing human resources. China comes and China leaves. That 400 people of a design center will come, and after the project is done, it would leave. We on the Western Front, we come with a core team and we enhance that population. You look at Uzbekistan, 50% is less than age 30. Of that, 50% is highly educated. So the ingredients are there to enhance that. Midstream, this is not a transaction. So this is not money for metal. If you're going to approach money for metal, okay, the Central Asia is looking to use its natural resources, not for capital. Please understand that. Central Asian countries are looking to utilize their natural resources to contribute to the industrialization of the countries, which means midstream is going to be located in Central Asia. It's from a business point of view, it makes sense. The midstream, the metal production should be close to the upstream, and also midstream is going to be built in those countries to help in the industrialization. Can you partner there? Absolutely. Okay. But if you put a condition of the midstream needs to be where the demand side is, then you're basically saying the same thing as China. So come up with something that is a positive differentiator with respect to China. Come up with a formula where the benefits and the risks are shared where the midstream is located in the supply side. One more thing, and I'm going to leave it. Stockpiling. Okay, so U.S. has a stockpiling strategy. In fact, it has a stockpiling department. EU is trying to do it for years. In the recent strategy, Christopher, I've seen there's a stockpiling program as well in UK. Wonderful. But remember, China is stockpiling under the ground, which means they're buying left and right, greenfield, what we refer to as risky projects for the future. So when you are having a stockpiling strategy, please also evaluate what your dominant force is doing when it comes to stockpiling. So thank you. Sorry.
That was good. Richard, the obvious question is what's Russia's role in this? But I'd like to broaden it out a bit. And, we've seen quite a few terrorists come out of the region. So can you talk a little bit about Russia and terrorism and how getting involved in promoting the mineral wealth will support resolutions?
Well, clearly Russian links in Central Asia are long-standing and very close. There's historical links, but there's power links too. And of course, they were all those countries were originally part of the Soviet Union. And if I was, if I was sitting in a Central Asian, one of the Stan governments, or just generally, I would be looking at the world in terms of power. And Russia can still wield power, although I think the reality is that with the Russian war in Ukraine, the Central Asian countries are to a certain extent, sitting on the fence. They have, by and large, abstained from votes in the UN condemning the Russian aggression. And I think they're waiting and watching. And just coming back to power, the other aspect of power is the reality is that Europe is seen as a diminishing asset globally, as power, GDP and economic power shifts increasingly to China. I think UK is probably seen as where the hell is the UK asset? And also RAN, particularly as a result, because the reality is, despite endless governments pontificating about punching above our weight, particularly in defense terms, the reality is that we are a diminished organization and diminished power, and that will not be lost on people. So what? Coming back to the war, because that is the issue. If Russia prevails in Ukraine, if Ukraine is forced into capitulation by a Trump-driven capitulation peace deal, because that is the reality of all the peace deals, this Groundhog Day of deals that Trump has put on the table. They involve the capitulation of Ukraine and the domination of Ukraine by Russia. That will be viewed in Central Asia. My take is that Russia's top dog. Europe has failed to step up to the mark, as Europe has continued to fail to step up to the mark. So that doesn't augur very well, frankly, for European and UK engagement in Central Asia. And I'm afraid that is, unless the dynamic changes fundamentally, and there's not much sign of that happening in terms of this war, that is the most, and it grieves me to say it, that is the most likely outcome at the moment. But the reality of this war is this: there will not be any lasting peace deal or settlement to this war until either Russia wins or Ukraine wins. There's no settlement yet. Putin is never going to give up his intent to remove Ukraine from the map as a sovereign state. He has said, I will go on fighting until the last Ukrainian is dead. By the way, he's also prepared to go on fighting until the last Russian is dead, looking at the astronomical casualty figures the Russians have taken. So this isn't going to be, there's not going to be a peace deal until either Russia is defeated or Ukraine gives up. And I don't see Ukraine giving up. So what? This thing goes on and on and on until either side is exhausted. Or until Europe, because you can rule out America under Trump, because America under Trump is not going to bear down on Russia. In fact, everything that Trump is doing is demonstrating unequivocally that Trump is in Putin's pocket. So watch Europe. Is Europe going to step up to the mark? I think it's unlikely. If it does, then that's great for anybody wanting to engage in Central Asia, because it demonstrates European resolve, capability, etc. The jury remains out. But as you say, Ros, it's also a complex mix of Islamic countries and inevitably, and as those of us who got involved, will remember the Afghan saga and the events of the first 2 decades of this century. Terrorism is there as a reality, and I think but it's a reality. It's understand. It goes back to my points about understanding the landscape. It doesn't mean you need to be put off from engaging in there. You just need to understand the nature of the threat. Terrorism, jihadism, is a reality in Mali. It's a reality in Burkina Faso. But there are mining companies operating there. And they have had to learn the hard way to operate according to the nature of the country in which they sit.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, Arthur's telling me we need to wrap up. I think he wants some time back, but just 1 minute, one last thought from both of you.
Well, if you want to extend this dialogue, which I would like to, but unfortunately I have to leave. Arthur has my contact details, but please reach out to me if you want to continue this dialogue, and I'd really appreciate Sir Richard's views on the geopolitics here.
I'm going to give you a quotation from Clausewitz, the great philosopher of war. It is the duty of the commander to understand the nature of the war in which he engages or is about to engage. And that is just as applicable to any mining company wanting to operate in Central Asia understand the nature of the environment you are operating in. You've heard from Han the reality of Chinese capital and Chinese capabilities. Focus on what you can do and think about it in that honed, precise way.
Can I give one quotation too, though? Just remember. So 80% of success is showing up. So think about that.
Fantastic. That's a good one to end on. So thank you very much, gentlemen. That's been fascinating.